Hello everybody. Today we'll see a short summary of Aristotle's Poetics. Aristotle begins of the essay Poetics by explaining what imitation is all about. Imitation is not mere mimicry but a truly creative activity. All fine arts like poetry, tragedy, comedy, sculpture, painting, music are all modes of imitation. Various art forms differ from each other in three ways: medium of imitation, objects of imitation, and manner of imitation. Poetry imitates men as doing or experiencing something. It does not imitate men as such, but imitates men as doing or experiencing something. Now, what does a tragedy do? A tragedy portrays men as better than they actually are, and they do that in a grand and elevated style. Okay? Whereas comedy portrays men as worse than they actually are, and comedy is intended to cause laughter. Okay? Comedy is not morally bad, but it is ridiculous. It is productive of laughter, but it is not intended to cause any pain or harm to others. Now, the modes of imitation may be narrative, dramatic, or a combination of two. As you all know, epic uses the narrative style, whereas tragedy uses a dramatic style. Now, let's take a look at what Aristotle had to say about the origin of poetry. He says poetry might have originated in the natural tendency of man to imitate his surroundings. Man derives a source of pleasure from accurate imitations. Poetry were of two types, namely poets who were serious and poets who were frivolous. Poets who were serious produced panegyrics or hymns to God, and poets who were frivolous produced satires. Now, moving on to the crux of the essay, definition of tragedy. Whenever you write an essay on Aristotle's Poetics, do remember to write this essay within quotes, which will fetch you more marks. A tragedy is an imitation of an action that is serious and complete in itself and of a certain magnitude. It employs a language embellished with artistic ornament, with situations arousing pity and fear to accomplish the catharsis of the emotion. So, if you break up this essay, this definition into different parts, the first part reads thus: a tragedy is an imitation of an action. We already told what imitation is, that it is not a mere comic event, or it is not mere mimicry, but it is a serious action. Imitation is a serious action, right? So, tragedy is an imitation of an action. And what is the peculiarity of the action? The action should be serious and complete in itself. You cannot take a frivolous, momentary, comic action of human beings and call it a tragedy. No, that cannot be done. Okay, it should also be complete in itself. That is, it should have a proper beginning, a middle, and an end. Okay, it should employ a language embellished with artistic ornament, and the tragedy should have situations arousing pity and fear. Only when the tragedy has situations arousing pity and fear does it accomplish the catharsis of such emotion. Catharsis of emotion means purgation or purification. So, after reading a tragedy or after listening to or viewing a tragedy, the audience should undergo a sort of purgation. They should rethink, or they should think of their activities themselves, which results in their own purification or purgation. Now, in order to result in such purification or purgation, there should be situations which arouse the pity and fear of the audience. Okay. So tragedy is an imitation of an action that is serious and complete in itself and of a certain magnitude. It employs a language embellished with artistic ornament, with situations arousing pity and fear to accomplish the catharsis of such emotion. Catharsis means purification or purgation. Then Aristotle goes on to explain the 6 elements of tragedy. What are the 6 elements of tragedy? First one being plot, second character, third thought, fourth diction, fifth melody, and sixth spectacle. Now explaining the 6 elements of tragedy. The first and the foremost one was plot. An ideal plot should have a proper beginning, middle, and an end. That is what we said in the definition of tragedy, that the tragedy should be serious and complete in itself. For a piece of art to be complete, it should have a proper beginning, a middle, and an end. Okay, every part of the plot should be linked together naturally and inevitably. You should not feel rather that you can remove an episode or you can remove a portion from the tragedy and it doesn't affect the free flow of the plot. For example, if you watch some serials, you watch an episode today and you watch a 4-month-old later episode, you can understand the storyline very easily because there will not be much happenings in between. All the things that happened in between will be very frivolous, will be very silly, and that might not have affected the storyline much. That should not be the case with plot. Every single element or every single part of the plot should be linked together naturally and inevitably. Now, for example, if you take the tragedy Hamlet, when the ghost is introduced, if you take away that scene, it affects the storyline very badly, right? Or if you take away the mouse trap scene, that also affects the scene very badly. If you take away the Polonius giving advices to his son, if you take away that scene, you will miss some of the major character sketches in the novel. So that is how every single part of the novel should be linked, or of the plot should be linked to each other naturally and inevitably. And also there should be unity of action. Unity of action means if it is intended to be a tragedy, it should be a tragedy and it should not end up being a comic one. Okay, there should be unity of action. The plot may be simple or complex. Now, what is simple plot? Simple plot is something which moves forward uniformly and continuously without affecting the change of Now, parts of the tragedy. The sections of a tragedy may be divided into 6 parts, that is a prologue, a parode, an episode, a stasimon, comos, and exode. Prologue is the part preceding the parode. Now, what is parode? Parode is the entrance song of the chorus. Entrance song of the chorus is the parode, and the portion preceding this entrance song of the chorus becomes the prologue. Now, the entire part of the tragedy becomes the episode. Stasimon is the choric ode. Comos, what is comos? Comos is a joint lamentation of the chorus and actors together. Exode. Exode is the entire part of tragedy after the last song of chorus. So the parts of tragedy: prologue. Prologue is the part preceding the parode. Parode is the entrance song of the chorus. episode, the entire part of the tragedy, Stasimon, the choricod, Comos, the joint lamentation of chorus and actors together, and exhort, the entire part of the tragedy after the last song of chorus. Now, explaining what an ideal hero is all about. An ideal hero should be a man with human weakness and frailties. He should be an ordinary man and a man of intermediate kind. Okay, he should not be too good and not be too bad. He should have human weaknesses and frailties. The fall in his life should be a result of his own actions. Okay, there should not be any other villain in his plot. The villain of the plot should be his error in judgment. Okay, the hero's own error in judgment. That is hamartia. Hamartia is the error of judgment. And there are some things that the plot should not portray, like a good man passing from happiness to misery, a bad man passing from misery to happiness, and a bad man passing from happiness to misery. So these three elements are said to, these three types of plot are said to mislead the readers, and so they should be avoided. That is, a good man passing from happiness to misery, bad man passing from happiness to misery, and a bad man passing from misery to happiness. So he should be an ordinary man with intermediate kind, that is, with human weaknesses and frailties, and his fall in life should be because of his own error in judgment, that is hamartia. Okay. Now, character. The character should have certain essential features. That is, the character should be good, the character must be appropriate, and the character must be true to life and consistent. Now, what do I mean by the character must be good? That is, the words, thoughts, and actions of the characters must be good. During those times, women were considered inferior during the times, and even when introduced in tragedy, even when women characters are introduced in tragedy, they should have some good element in them. Okay, wicked characters should be introduced only when it is absolutely essential for the plot. Now, the characters should be appropriate. That is, they should be true to type or status. Like if you portray a woman, she should portray womanly characteristics and not manly characteristics. If you portray a slave, he should not be portrayed as someone having a very dignified character or a noble character. So he should represent his status. The characters must be consistent. That is, they should not change their character from one time to another. And the characters should be true to life. That is, the characters must have virtues, weakness, joys, and sorrows of average human beings, normal human beings. Okay. Now, thought and diction, the third and fourth elements of tragedy. Thought is the intellectual element in tragedy. Now, thought can be expressed in different ways as a proof, or it can be expressed as an argument with characters to prove or disprove something, or it can be in the production of emotional effects, or it can be in the indication of importance or significance of anything. The thought is the intellectual element in the tragedy. Okay. Now, diction. What is diction? As you all know, diction is the arrangement of words and images in a work. Now, words that used in a work may be of 6 kinds. That is, it may be from ordinary speech, everyday speech, or it can be foreign loan terms, or it can be metaphors or ornamental phrases, or newly coined words, or words made by the lengthening or shortening of words. So all these types of words form the diction of a piece of art. Now, melody and spectacle. Melody is employed to enhance the pleasure element of the tragedy, and spectacle, the mere sight. We already said there should be situations in the tragedy that arouse pity and fear, and then only it will result in the purgation of the emotion. So, spectacle is the mere sight that can arouse pity and fear. Now, Aristotle concludes the essay by explaining the superiority of tragedy. Tragedy is superior to epic. Tragedy has all the pleasure giving elements of epic in addition to music and spectacle. The appeal to emotions is stronger in case of tragedy. Okay, tragedy also better attains poetic effect. So, because of all these reasons, tragedy is said to be superior to other forms of fine arts. So, that was it. Thank you. Hope you got a clear idea of Aristotle's poetics. Hope it will help you from the exam point of view to write, say, an essay on Aristotle's poetics. Thank you.